recorded.
Welcome to the Respectability webinar, Introduction to Web Accessibility, Tips and Tricks. Your speaker for today's program are Dana Marlowe, Principal, Partner, and Co-Founder of Accessibility Partners, LLC, and Sharon Rosenblatt, a specialist in document remediation and compliance testing at Accessibility Partners. Audiocast quality is subject to your equipment, available bandwidth, and Internet traffic. If you experience unsatisfactory audio quality, please use the telephone dial-in option provided in your confirmation and reminder emails. If you have dialed in, operator assistance is available by pressing #. You may send questions at any time during this webinar using the chat window, which is located on the lower left corner of your presentation screen. A question and answer session will follow the presentation. Handouts for today's program can be downloaded using the Program Materials link in your confirmation and reminder emails, or from the Documents folder located in the lower right corner of the presentation screen. A short video will be played during the presentation. Participants listening over the phone should turn on their computer speakers to hear the audio while the video plays. Without further ado, I'll turn the call over to our moderator, Jennifer Laszlo-Mizrahi, President of RespectabilityUSA. Please begin.
Thank you, operator. I really appreciate your assistance, and we're just thrilled to have literally hundreds of people who've signed up for this webinar today and are on with us live. Today is a wonderful day. It's Global Accessibility Awareness Day. A lot of people don't know yet about this very exciting holiday, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and I think it's exciting because what it says is that everybody, regardless of their ability, has the equal opportunity and right and pleasure of using the Internet in all other kinds of communications. Today we're going to be focusing on online accessibility, and we have two extraordinary speakers who are going to be joining us, Dana Marlowe and Sharon Rosenblatt. Really, they are true experts in this field, and we did some rehearsals for this, so I've already seen the presentation, so I know just how delighted you will be. So I'm going to turn it over now to our terrific speakers. Their bios are on the deck if you want to look at them more closely later. And at the end of the presentation, you're going to have their contact info if you want to follow up personally with them. But I do want to remind you what the operator said, which is that we will be interested in your questions, and you can just type them into the screen. We look forward to them. This is meant to be very interactive. Respectability is a nonprofit organization, and we are here to serve you. So with no further ado, here is Dana and Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jennifer, and thank you all on the call today for joining us. As Jennifer mentioned, today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and we are so very honored to celebrate today with this webinar hosted by our good friends at Respectability, who do such incredible work, not just today, but every day of the year on building accessibility and inclusivity awareness around the world. So thank you all so much. On the screen is a quick agenda, just so that we can get the ball rolling for today's talk. So first, I want to just level set and provide some basic background information and definitions on disability and accessibility, share a few statistics with you, and then I'll tie that into what web accessibility is, which is why so many of you are here. And we'll talk about making a welcoming and inclusive website and share some suggestions around that. And then I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sharon Rosenblatt, and she will dive into a number of different tips and tricks on how to make web content more accessible. She'll also chat about the current state of accessibility and social media, and a lot of this is geared to varying levels of basic web understanding. So if you do have more technical or complex questions, you're welcome to table them to the end, or as Jennifer mentioned, we will share our contact information at the end of the presentation, and you really truly are welcome to reach out to us at any time. Finally, I will conclude and provide some steps about moving forward and discuss a little bit about the accessibility return on investment, the ROI, and then we'll open it up for some questions and answers. So to start off, the word disability can mean different things to different people. Trying to come up with an overarching term can be difficult, but the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, or the ADA, as many of you have heard of, has a working definition that I like to use. So under the ADA, An individual with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. There are a wide variety of disabilities, and within these, a lot of overlap. So there are blindness, low vision, deafness, hearing loss, people with limited movement, speech disabilities, cognitive limitations, or combinations of any of the disabilities that I just mentioned. And just some food for thought. Not only are people with disabilities the largest minority group in the country, but they're the only minority group that anyone can enter at any time in their life in any fashion. Unfortunately, accidents, illness, and life happens, and so therein anybody is welcome to join this group. So looking at the numbers for a second, the U.S. Census has identified that over 60 million Americans have at least one disability. And this translates to about 1 out of every 5 Americans, or roughly 20%. Now, since it is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, please keep in mind that globally, the number is a little bit different in different countries and regions of the world. But for the purposes of this presentation here in the U.S., 1 out of every 5 is a very common number that's used. However, 1 out of every 3 households in America includes a person with a disability because there are so many people that disability touches. So 52% of Americans either have a disability or a close friend or loved one with a disability. And as the baby boomer generation ages, disabilities will only become more common. Most disabilities are acquired, as we all know, as people age and some of our faculties decrease. We all know that it's unavoidable, but it does lead to an increased need for accessibility and technology. So just as far as the numbers in this area, there are currently about 76 million baby boomers living in America at present time. And furthermore, because of the growing amount of people with disabilities, this is clearly a really large market. So people with disabilities have an estimated discretionary income of $220 billion. Thus, this makes the accessibility market a tremendous, tremendous commodity and not one to be overlooked. So what is accessibility? I think many of you probably have a definition in your head. Some of you may not. This might be brand new to others who are on this call. But how do you define something, an idea that is so fundamental to so many people? So accessibility means equal access. If it's available to everyone, then an idea or concept is truly accessible. So everything can, in theory, be accessible, but it can get more complicated in practice. So when you translate accessibility to technology, well, generally speaking, technology is considered accessible if it can be used just as effectively by people with disabilities as it can by those without. So there is no doubt our society is taking steps to become more accessible, as evidenced all over the place in the U.S. by physical accommodations such as raised braille in elevators and curb cuts, which is where on the side of the street and sidewalk where the curb cut has an indentation so that people in wheelchairs and motorized scooters can easily traverse from one sidewalk to the street back to the next sidewalk. And such accommodations will make life easier for everyone. Yet the changes within technology and the rapid change of said technology are a bit more intricate. So what is assistive technology? I'd like to just talk a little bit about that for a moment before we start diving into the nitty-gritty of web accessibility and web tips. We kind of have to just take a step back and have a little bit of an understanding and a baseline for assistive technology and how people with disabilities interact with online and the web. So assistive technology is defined as any piece of technology that is commonly used to maintain or increase the functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. And it can include conventional items that you might encounter every day, even though they're not necessarily technology. Some do have those components, and others do include them in this category. And that might be items like wheelchairs, walkers, motorized scooters. There's also another part of assistive technology, and that would be hardware, with some examples like a refreshable braille display. And this is a piece of hardware that turns computer text, so text that might be in a document or online on the website, into physical braille output, so that the person who's blind or low vision, who's reading the braille, can actually feel the raised braille, and it changes as they're reading throughout the page. To other items such as software applications, like screen reading software that translates text to speech, and other peripherals like headsticks or augmented mice. And this aids in technology access that helps make the web more usable to people of all abilities. And that is our focus today. So a screen reader, as I just mentioned, provides audio output of text on the screen, meaning if a person who is blind or low vision is using a screen reader as their assistive technology to access the web, it reads out loud the information that is on the screen. And so we have a clip here. It's roughly a minute, I think just under a minute and a half, about a little under 90 seconds. And it's a sample video of a screen reader that is called JAWS. It's one of the popular screen readers here in the States, and it's from a company called Freedom Scientific. And so this is a video called Art Beyond Sight, JAWS Screen Reader. Here an example, and we're going to hit play and hope that, that this works.
This is the home page of the Handbook for Educators and Museums on the Art Beyond Sight website. Listen to how a blind person with the JAWS screen reader would experience some of this page.
Handbook graphic. Link graphic programming A-Z. Link graphic photo of a teacher and student's hands feeling clay. Graphic step-by-step through the entire process. This page link graphic accessibility.
I'm not hearing sound.
Training. This page link graphic photo of hands exploring a tactile drawing of Pablo Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, 1907. Graphic make your programs and facilities
Jennifer, this is Dana. It does look like the participants can hear it, but you, as one of the moderators, are not able to, which is what I think Michelle had just covered.
Graphic photo of hands signing ABS. Graphic teach staff about disability and inclusion. This page link graphic human resources. This page link graphic photo of hands on the computer. Graphic employment at museums and in the arts. Blank. Our handbook takes you through the process of creating
participants are emailing that they're not hearing it.
People with visual impairments. Graphic photo of a man reading Braille descriptions of a display of Jasper John's prints accompanied by a young woman at the museum.
So Michelle, the operator, do you have any suggestions? I know we just wrapped the 90-second audio YouTube video of the JAWS example. It looked like a lot of the participants could, but
majority of the participants are able to hear it. For those participants who are unable to hear it, either their computer speakers were turned off or they have a flash software that's not up to date.
All right, we need to proceed.
Okay. Well, that was a sample. We're more than happy to email that YouTube video out with the demonstration after as well for anyone who wants to see what a screen reader looks like in action. Moving on. Sometimes people with disabilities cannot use a standard keyboard or mouse, which makes web access difficult, as you can imagine. And so these kinds of assistive technology devices or augmented input devices are used for people also with not just vision loss, but also mobility or dexterity disabilities. And so these can include on-screen keyboards where the keyboard is actually on the screen itself. Or sometimes, as I mentioned, there's Braille keyboards on refreshable Braille displays as input and output, and joysticks which help users input information into a website if they do have mobility impairment. There are also other ways to input information through mouse sticks and speech recognition software. And you might be aware that some of your phones may have speech recognition already built in, For those participants on this call or listening in at a later date, if you have, for example, an iPhone, the program called Siri interacts with the user of the phone using speech recognition. So if you were to hold down your home key on an iPhone for several seconds in a row, you can ask Siri through speech recognition whatever you wanted it to say. So for example, you might hold it down and say, please search the web for coffee shops near me, and then Siri does her thing, thinks about it, and pulls up a list. And so that's speech recognition, where it's recognizing your speech. And so for people with mobility disabilities and some other dexterity disabilities, speech recognition is a common type of assistive technology. Video phones are also another kind of useful assistive technology. They help with the increasing demand of face-to-face communication and can also include American Sign Language interpreters. And video phones allow users to communicate in a variety of formats, whether through text or audio, to anyone else who possesses the same software. Plus, for a person with a mobility disability, it also removes the need for traveling to a meeting in person. And so that removes some barriers. So then people can meet anywhere and anytime with a video phone. So just kind of going over a little bit about what we've learned. Web accessibility really means that people with disabilities can use the Internet. More specifically, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact, and that they can, of course, contribute to all things on the Internet. And web accessibility also benefits others, including people with changing abilities due to aging, because as we all know, I'm certainly one. I'm not getting any younger, and so watching the technology that's out there and available is very promising. And this can be seen as people slowly begin to increase the text size as they develop visual disabilities as they age. So web accessibility really encompasses all disabilities that affect access and hopes for equal usability by all. So a couple things to consider when creating an inclusive website. A website has two basic purposes: to be your brand, okay, and I realize that there's folks on the phone on this webinar that work for organizations, nonprofits, federal agencies, state agencies, corporations, academic institutions. And so whatever your positioning is or whatever your organization's website is, it has to be your brand and kind of your welcome mat out to your public, to your constituents, and to be a tool for your users to gain whatever information you're sharing. So with each of these issues, you want your website to be welcoming and also, of course, accessible to all, especially those with disabilities. So here are some quick suggestions for making your website welcoming and inclusive right off the bat. The first off is utilizing welcoming words. So you want to ensure that the website's About Us section and mission statement include language about being inclusive of people of all abilities. And don't limit inclusion to just people with disabilities. This is a really great opportunity to celebrate welcoming other differences as well. And this is a topic where you'll want to consult with your stakeholders and your key team members, as it should be your official policy. Another area is to utilize inclusive photos. So putting photos of people with disabilities that are related to your organization or industry right on your website really sends a message, because as we all know, a picture is truly worth 1,000 words. So photos that send a message that you really are an inclusive organization and include people with disabilities helps break down the attitudinal barriers that are really present still out there. And when you take your own photos, you should know that the photos that work well are of people with disabilities side by side with their peers and colleagues without visible disabilities. People want to see equality and respect in practice. Also, advertise that accommodations are available. So if you work for an organization or you represent an entity that sends out event invitations or your hiring announcements for job openings, that you really want to state that accommodations are available for these kinds of events and activities, if that is the case. So for example, if the space where you might be hosting an event is ADA accessible, or perhaps your building auditorium has access to an FM loop system, which helps out a lot of people who are hard of hearing, you might want to put that on the flyer or invitation, the same way you might add other supporting data. So now, at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague Sharon, who's going to roll up her sleeves and really share some quick tips and tricks on how you can start implementing accessibility on your website today.
Thanks so much, Dana. I appreciate it. Now that we know the importance of accessibility, especially for our technology after that amazing introduction, it's time to put the wheels in motion and take it to our websites. The first, perhaps most well-known tip is alternative text. Adding alternative text for images, or really anything visual, is the first principle of web accessibility. It is also one of the most difficult to properly implement, but I'll get to that in a bit. Alternative text provides a textual alternative to non-text content in web pages for things like graphics, maps, charts, buttons, images, and more. Some people think of it as a caption, and that's kind of a close comparison. Alternative text serves several functions, but for web accessibility, it is read by screen readers in place of images. It allows the content and function of the image to be accessible to those with visual or certain cognitive disabilities, also kind of like giving a picture 1,000 words. It's added directly into the HTML code with the alt equals attribute, as you can see on my screen. Here are some tips for writing good alt text. You want to be accurate and equivalent in presenting the same content and function of the image. Be succinct. This means the correct content, if there is content, and function, if there is a function of the image, should be presented as concisely as appropriate. Typically, no more than a few words are necessary, though rarely a short sentence or two might be appropriate. You should avoid being redundant or providing the same information as text within the context of the image. Also, avoid using phrases image of or graphic of to describe the image. It is apparent to a screen reader user already that this is an image. However, if the fact that an image is a photograph or illustration, it is important content, and that might be useful to include in the alternative text. So now that you know what needs alternative text, which again is any non-textual element, the next part is to actually type it out. There is a fine line between providing vague text and going overboard with too much. When writing alt text, it is important to ask yourself what information the image is conveying. Think about what the most important and essential parts are and your biggest takeaways. The most appropriate alt text for an image depends on the way in which the image is used. In fact, the same image can be used for different reasons under different circumstances, and each instance of the image would have different alternative text. Keep in mind the following rule. The most appropriate alt text communicates the purpose of the graphic and not its appearance. One of the most fundamental rules about alternative text is never be vague. If you are looking at the image on my screen and studying cars, an example of that alternative text would just be including the phrase, a car. The reader has no idea if this is a photograph, a graphic, drawing, etc. Why is the car important? Better alt text would be a picture of a silver Mercedes sports car. That's descriptive, but let's say your audience is full of car buffs. There are varying Mercedes out there. So an even a better example of alt text would say a silver Mercedes CLS 350 sports car. Now that's the important part of the photograph, and a user with visual disabilities would know exactly what's in front of him. Let's move on. Related to visual elements on websites, one suggestion is that color alone should never be used to convey information on a website. Users with visual disabilities, such as blindness, color blindness, or color contrast deficiencies, may not understand the content being presented, as they may not be able to distinguish between colors. Additionally, websites created with information based on color lose that information when viewed with high contrast. For instance,
The image on my screen says click on the green button to win a car or the red button to erase your hard drive. Both buttons have the same explanatory text. This is an example of where someone who has a visual disability would not be able to discern the colors to make the proper choice. You should use surrounding text to make an emphasis and not rely on color alone. This doesn't mean you can't use color, of course. Just be mindful of what the color use is conveying. Our next topic of discussion is a timeout, which is employed in order to track how long a user has been inactive on a web page. For example, some of you may have experienced this when buying concert tickets, and there is only a certain amount of time to fill out payment information before the tickets are released back into the system. I certainly seem to never be in the same room as my wallet when this happens, so it's always a mad scramble to make sure you can fill out your demographics and get your credit card information in time. Some challenges that users with disabilities face with timeouts are that the timeout warning isn't clearly identifiable on the screen or with their assistive technology, or that the timeout session isn't long enough for them to complete an activity. So some ways to correct this are indicating in the text of the content how long the application session state is. You should also prompt a user when the session is about to expire and return focus and provide notification when a session has actually expired. Hypertext links are one of the most basic elements of the web and therefore also web accessibility. You probably clicked on a couple of links to get to this webinar today. For the most part, creating accessible links is an easy task. Standard hypertext links work with all technologies and platforms, and users of all abilities can access them, whether directly or through some sort of assistive technology. Because links are so basic to the functionality of web content, inaccessible links are a serious barrier to overall accessibility. Users must be able to navigate to and select each link using the keyboard alone. You can test this now by using the Tab key to navigate through a web page. Links should also make sense out of context. Phrases such as click here, more, click for details, and so on are kind of ambiguous when read out of context. At the same time, it would be overkill to ensure that every detail about a link description is discernible by listening to that link context. For instance, don't just have a link that says click here down towards the bottom of the page when you're trying to lead to a contact us information page. Instead, have the text surrounding the link say click here to contact us and contact us be the active text of the link. While we're on the subject of tabbing around a website, another item that the Tab key moves to are form fields. These are any areas for users to input information like text boxes, radio buttons, checkboxes, and more. This might get a little too technical for some, but because the ID of the form field must be unique on each page, only one label can be associated to each unique form element. This is evidenced with the example on my screen. Basically, you cannot have one label for multiple form elements. Conversely, screen readers do not support multiple labels that are associated with the same form element. Think of it like a 1-to-1 ratio, and they're also like links. They are read in the same fashion. Text labels should generally describe the function of each form control. When designing a website, place the label adjacent to its respective form control, such as the text box, checkbox, radio button, menu, etc. Labels are usually positioned above or to the left of controls. However, the labels for checkboxes and radio buttons are usually to the right of the control. Sighted users should be able to visually associate a text label with its corresponding form control. Users with visual disabilities, however, cannot make this visual association. Labels can, however, be associated programmatically with form controls using HTML markup. The label element is used to associate a text label to a form control. This allows a screen reader to read the associated label text when the user navigates to the form control with their assistive technology. Equivalent alternatives for any multimedia presentation should be synchronized. This means not only adding captions for audio or movie files, but also making sure they sync up with the file being shown in real time. The best example you can witness is in what's happening in our webinar right now. If your web content regularly includes videos or audio, try to provide subtitles, especially if you're producing the bulk of your own content. In this scenario, it's easier to do it in-house with someone who understands the content that you've created. You might see that video hosting sites such as YouTube have tools that allow users to add subtitles to their clips automatically, but it's often not as reliable. Making a transcript of the video available online is also an incredibly helpful resource for users who have auditory disabilities like deafness or hard of hearing. So I know I got into this a little bit earlier, but regardless if a user operates the website using a mouse, a keyboard, a screen reader, screen magnifier, or speech recognition, you must allow them access to the user interface. You don't want to have areas that might be difficult to reach. And as always, consider testing with assistive technology as well as with users with disabilities. Keyboard accessibility is one of the most important aspects of disability access. People who are blind generally cannot use a mouse because they cannot see where to click. They use their keyboards almost exclusively. Additionally, some individuals with low vision may use a keyboard for improved interactions if the page is enlarged and the contrast is high. When navigating a page via the keyboard, a sighted user must be provided a visual indicator of what element currently has keyboard focus. You might see this as a black box around where the tab key has focus or a highlighted region. It just depends on the preferences of the user interface. You can test this out on your own by tabbing through a website and checking that you can access all of the links and form fields and that there is a visual identifier of where the cursor focus is. The tab key really is the most important tool when checking web accessibility. However, imagine a website right now in your head. Typically, the main content is not usually the first thing that is read on a web page. Keyboard and screen reader users generally must navigate a very, very long list of navigation links, sublists of links, corporate icons, site searches, and other elements before arriving at the main content. This is particularly difficult for users with some form of motor disabilities. Without a system for bypassing the long list of links, some users are at a huge disadvantage. The skip navigation idea was invented to give screen reader and keyboard users the same capability of going directly to the main content that a sighted mouse user might take for granted. For repetitive navigation links, often found at the top of the page, skip navigation bypasses them and moves to the main content. But don't assume this is only for screen readers. Keyboard-only users also need to move to the main areas for link and form controls quickly. The idea is quite simple enough. You can provide a link at the top of the page which jumps the user down to an anchor or target at the beginning of the main content. So as I wrap up, here's some more food for thought when you're ready to tackle some bigger items with web accessibility. Just to pique your interest, the Web Accessibility Initiative, or WAI, has promoted ARIA, the Accessible Rich Internet Application Suite. This defines a way to make web content and web applications more accessible to people with disabilities. It also helps with dynamic content and advanced user interface controls developed with AJAX, JavaScript, and related technologies. Currently, certain functionality used in websites is not available to some users with disabilities, especially people who rely on screen readers and people who cannot use the mouse. ARIA introduces these accessibility challenges, for example, by defining new ways for functionality to be provided to assistive technology. Within ARIA, developers can make advanced web applications accessible and usable to people with disabilities. When combined with roles, the code can supply the assistive technologies with user interface information to convey to that user at any time. Changes in any states or properties, such as countdowns, will result in a notification to assistive technologies, which could alert the user that a change in timing has occurred. So let's see this in practice. I saw a couple of questions about social media and web accessibility, and there's actually been a survey by WebAIM, or the Web Accessibility in Mind, which surveyed screen reader users, and they found that roughly half, about 54% of screen reader users surveyed found social media sites to be very accessible or somewhat accessible, while about 1/3, or 33% of respondents, said that social media sites were very inaccessible or somewhat inaccessible. There's certainly a lot of room for improvement there. Some common accessibility issues with sites like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube include a lack of section headings, poor color contrast, an inability to navigate using keyboard alone, an inability to operate functionality using keyboard alone, missing text equivalents for images, an inability to resize text, and videos lacking captioning. So, I now leave web accessibility in your capable hands to see these and challenge you to fix the web on your own site. You can start small, and as you learn more, accessibility can grow and grow. Now I'm going to turn this back to Dana.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon, for sharing all of that totally amazing information. I know that I find I learn something new all the time when listening to you. And once, for everyone on the phone, once you really start thinking about these different accessibility components and websites, and you become accessible for your organization, whether you're public or private sector, there are a ton of benefits that you can reap from promoting your accessible website. And just at a very high level, you can maximize reach, your revenues, and ultimately profits, if applicable to your organization. Again, I understand that there's a variety of public and private sector on this webinar. In addition, you can further benefit from creating accessibility statements that will be available to the public, ideally on your website, and really touting what your organization has done as far as accessibility and inclusivity, whether it's just the website or a more holistic approach at your organization. Another area to look at is to create an accessibility roadmap, kind of a top-down approach that can help with planning any future solutions, whether it's in technological areas or accessibility regarding employing more people with disabilities and making sure that you have the appropriate assistive technology and accessibility channels at your organization. There's a lot of different touch points that an accessibility roadmap has. And another benefit is that you'll also retain your current investment in your resources and tap into a new pool of knowledge workers and those folks with disabilities. And this, therefore, increases productivity for all. So accessibility also generates a positive media response. And again, if applicable, this can be used as a competitive differentiator and really make your organization stand out in a very positive way. It can increase your customer or constituent loyalty and support corporate social responsibility as well. And lastly, you can attract not only those people with disabilities, but their families, friends, coworkers, colleagues as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today at this webinar, and I want to provide our contact information. It's on the screen, and I'll read it out loud. Again, my name is Dana Marlowe, and my email address is dmarlowe, that's DMARLOWE, at accessibilitypartners.com. And my colleague Sharon Rosenblatt is srosenblatt at accessibilitypartners.com. That's SROSEN, B as in boy, LAPT at accessibilitypartners.com, which is our website. My direct line, I always put it out there, is 301-717-7177. I'm based on the East Coast of the U.S., but anyone is welcome to reach out anytime. We're also on various social media platforms. I think we have Facebook and our Twitter handle listed. You can also find us on LinkedIn. We really would like to thank Respectability and Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi again for hosting this exciting webinar and inviting us at Accessibility Partners to present information on some tips and tricks to make your website accessible today for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Our resource links and websites can be found at the end of the slide deck, and this whole PowerPoint will also be shared from Respectability. So at this time, I want to say thank you again to Respectability and Jennifer, and turn it over to you. I know you have a little some helpful information to also share with everyone. Thank you.
Well, Dana and Sharon, I want to thank you very much, and I want to invite people to keep sending questions our way because they're going to be addressing them. But I did see a question that was particularly about charts and graphs, and so we did another webinar earlier on accessibility in PowerPoints and in Word documents and PDFs. And it's a 1-hour webinar, and so these are the links to it. And there's quite a bit on how to do charts and graphs in that webinar, so I want to invite you to go to that, and to hopefully you will find that useful. I also want to let you know that our next webinar coming up is going to be about employment for young people with disabilities, and this is a very exciting program called Project Search, which is achieving a 70% employment outcome in competitive integrated employment for young people with disabilities, predominantly people with intellectual disabilities, social skills disabilities, more people with developmental disabilities. It's an exciting program that's in 43 states, serving about 2,700 people each year. And I want to go to this resources page because these are some terrific resources that we got from Dana and Sharon, and I want to thank them for giving those to us. And you can download the PowerPoint in what you have, so those are very helpful. So let me go up to the web and start reading some of these questions out so that Sharon and Dana can answer them for us. So the first question was where the $200 billion statistic came from that we heard earlier in terms of discretionary income for resources of people with disabilities. So if you can answer that for us.
Hi, this is Sharon. We have that. We've been quoting most of our disability statistics, statistics from the U.S. Census data. If you go to, I believe, census.gov, they have some certain tabs there that are specifically related to disability statistics. And I know that number has been extrapolated a lot into other information, so it might be present on other websites.
Great.
I hope that I can throw a link in the chat.
That would be great if you could put a link in the chat. I think people would really appreciate that. Also, there's a question about charts and graphs, and I did refer them to that other webinar that we did, but do you want to add anything to that, even though they don't have the advantage of having the graphic in front of them at this moment?
That's fine. I'd be happy to answer that. And this is Sharon again. We've come into a lot of charts and graphs, especially if you're talking about web content, because often the data labels aren't shared or the statistics aren't, so it's often just read as a flat image. One of the things I have two recommendations actually for that is one, you provide very, very descriptive alt text, sharing the trend, the data labels, the title, but that can be kind of complicated if there's a lot of data points. We also recommend sharing it as a table if that's possible, another way to share the data, and there's certain table headings that you would want to program into your into your table that denotes the headings and that the data cells are below it. One issue that you come into with charts and graphs are color usage. And I know we talked about before, you don't want color to be the sole identifier. If you absolutely have to share a chart and a graph, you can try different patterns or textures that might be a little bit more visually apparent. But really the best way to do this is through a table or with the descriptive alt text. You want pretty much an equivalent textual alternative for the data in the graph and the findings as someone would discern visually.
Terrific, very helpful. Somebody else is asking for a link to the YouTube for that video that we showed, so maybe it can be put into the chat text here by somebody from your team, just the link to that YouTube that we played, because not everyone had their computer sound on when it was being played. So we'll just put that link in there for you. And then there's a question about when people were listening to that video that it did say image of. of. And so the question is that because somebody put into the text image of, or is that because JAWS reads out loud image of when it comes to it automatically?
It depends on the screen reader. Usually JAWS will announce graphics. It's very possible that our recommendation, while not, specifically in accessibility, it just makes it a little bit more user-friendly, so JAWS isn't announcing graphic twice. You're always more than welcome to. It certainly doesn't hinder accessibility. We're just providing some more usability tips there. So it's possible that our recommendation doesn't always jive, because accessibility is certainly much more fluid. These aren't, rigid guidelines. This is just our personal recommendation.
And then the next question is, what are the best practice when you have a question with sort of tables or multi-level question? For example, please choose your gender, and then you've got, male and female, etc. How do you handle that with your subtext?
Goodness, that would probably be an ARIA question, because that's a bit more complicated. There are certainly form controls for that. I'd have to see the table before I could answer that, to see the program behind it.
I don't remember who that was, because we're scrolling as the questions keep coming as we're going through them. But to the person who asked that question, if you'd like to email Dana and Sharon directly, we would be happy to get you a more specific answer if you'd like to do that. And again, our email addresses, if you didn't catch them before, will be available when the PowerPoint presentation gets circulated from Respectability.
So then the next question is there a web version for a screen reader emulator?
You could try, actually, if you're trying to, if I understand the question, emulate the experience of a screen reader just through a website, that's not a downloaded software. There's certainly NVDA, that's probably the best one that you can download, and that's actually a free screen reader.
Can you say that again, what that is?
Yeah, it's NVDA, and it stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access, and it's a free screen reader, and I know that they make it very easy to download on their website. And I think Dana is going to share some more information. I'm going to put the NVDA free screen reader link into the chat box on the lower left pane right now.
And I'll tell you that in our office, as a quality control measure, we tend to use that or another screen reader for all of our documents before we go live with them. We literally have people who are hearing and who are sighted go through our documents to play the sound to see that it makes sure that we got everything taken care of before we go live with it, because it's easy to accidentally omit something, particularly when you're new at it. We're run largely by interns. We call them a fancier word, fellows, but that means that we have a lot of turnover of young, smart people here who are learning this for the first time. So we find that just checking our work by using these free online screen readers to check our work before we go live with it really helps. So the next question is, as the webmaster for a state agency providing services for deaf and hard of hearing people, almost all videos are subtitled. I'm trying to find a WordPress plugin that will add the ability for the user to change the font size and screen contrast. There are very few plugins, and I'm not sure what to do at this point. That's my question. Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, hi Ron, this is Dana. You're asking an excellent question, and you're correct. There are few plugins. Let me take this one and get back to you on it. If you'd be willing to either reach out to me privately and provide your contact information, or I can get it after, I'd be happy to do a little bit of research on what other plugins are out there that would help you as far as changing that font size and screen contrast within WordPress. So I'd be happy to get back to you on that.
So then the next question was, can you give an example of what a skip navigation link looks like in code and on screen?
Thanks. This is Sharon. I'd be happy to send whomever sent that actually an example. We have
bit more best practices, about skip navigation. So usually you can see it on larger like corporate websites. I'm thinking like either shopping things. It's not usually going to be visual. A lot of sites like making theirs invisible so that it doesn't say skip navigation on top. It's often, a 1 pixel by 1 pixel link that somebody would tab to, and it's the first thing that a screen reader will announce when going and navigating through that page. So they'll tab to that, and then it jumps. So it's usually not a visual thing. However, I'd be happy to provide an example of coding of that for you. So I'll go through the chat and see who that was, or if you could reach out to me again. This is Sharon Rosenblatt. I'd be happy to send you a more detailed example of that.
Great, thanks,
Great.
Sharon.
Now, Neil is asking what accessibility tools you might recommend.
Is for testing or for development? Does the question?
He said, Neil asked, which accessibility test tool do you recommend?
Do you recommend?
Depends on the browser. If you're an Internet Explorer, you can try the Web Accessibility Toolbar. And that's often, and I think we'll probably throw a link to that in the chat. That will kind of go through some of the big, hard-hitting checking, looking for images without alt text, tables without labels, really form fields that aren't labeled, instances of color contrast, and it'll kind of just point things out to you. I'm a little wary about giving away too much with automated testing tools. We really promote testing with users with disabilities because testing tools can sometimes have false positives, but there's also the WAVE toolbar that's in Firefox, W-A-V-E, and that's another one. You can also use Firebug in Firefox as well, and that can help look at where certain instances of inaccessibility might lie.
Thanks. And Jennifer, before you jump in, I saw earlier on, I think it got embedded within, there were a bunch of questions streaming in simultaneously. Jan H. asked, can alt text be used on Facebook? And while Facebook is obviously clearly one of the most dominating popular social media sites here in the States and abroad in many countries as well, they have been working on accessibility. Clearly, when it comes to alt text and static websites, Sharon shared quite a bit about providing alt text and the benefits of adding alt text to images and graphics when you have a static website. But when you have a site like Facebook where clearly most of the content is all generated by billions and billions of users, with, quadrillions of, I don't even have a number for how many images and photos and graphics are shared on a regular basis, just off the top of my head. It gets a little trickier. If it's something that you represent an organization, or you're asking us for a personal question. One easy thing that you can always do is when you're uploading an image or photo is in the status boxes to write image description and share it there. I'm about to share just some information about the photo alt text fetcher, and that has more technical information about adding alt text to Facebook. I'm not an expert in this specific area, but I will share this link. And now, Jennifer, if you wanted to jump down, I just didn't want to lose Jan's question.
Yeah, sorry. So the next question was if you can speak to tools such as Site Improve for checking web pages. You did mention some other ones earlier, but you didn't mention Site Improve.
Hi, this is Sharon. I don't have any experience with Site Improve. I would be happy to check it out more.
I think that we're Site Improve. I think is more of like an overall governance tool for one's websites, and they do a lot of different website maintenance. And one of their dozen different features is accessibility. So we don't use them. I think they do other things like web analytics, like what Google does, or they may do some security or search engine optimization. So I think they do a lot of stuff, and I think one of their components is accessibility, but we do not use
we don't use them. They may be very good, but we don't use a lot of the automated testing tools or even any. This is like a more overarching tool where accessibility is one sliver of what the service that the product provides is.
The next one, is there a tool like Bobby that was to test websites with? Which is a similar question.
I think Sharon kind of already covered that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So do you have any advice for someone who wants to get started in helping organizations with accessibility/508 compliance, but is mostly self-taught? Are there any trainings and certifications that you recommend for people to get?
This is Sharon. I cannot highly recommend WAI-ARIA enough. I know I've been quoting them profusely. They've been where I'm getting a lot of my web accessibility information and where I trained on when I was starting out in this field. They really break it down, and they too have examples of code that are the best way, and they have some tutorials. And I'll throw the link up there, but really WAI-ARIA is one of your best. You can also try some of the government websites. I know HHS, Health and Human Services, and the Social Security Administration, they have a lot of Section 508 and accessibility checklists. It might not teach you exactly how to do it, although they do have some trainings for 508 coordinators who might be able to apply to yourself, but they will kind of keep you as a way to check your work and test to those standards.
And Elizabeth, that's a great question. In addition to WAI-ARIA that Sharon recommended, I would highly recommend you check out the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, IAAP. And I'm going to put the link. I'm trying to keep up with the links, and I saw one that may not be working, so you're going to have to just bear with us as we try and get the links out there in the feed while it's open so anybody who wants them can grab them. If I miss one, I apologize in advance. But the International Association of Accessibility Professionals is a brand new organization that there's there twice. It's a brand new. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary in March, if you will, and that is an excellent place to reach out to other accessibility professionals to get educated. There's webinars, there's other educational opportunities, there's resources. We're going to be having our first ever annual conference this fall in October outside of Las Vegas. There are other events around the country that are hosted. If you have specific questions in mind, one of the things that we love is to be able to help folks interested in learning more about it or developing their potential. And so please feel free to reach out if the information at IAAP isn't, if you need even more. If you're, for example, in the Washington, D.C. area, there are meetups. There are, and several other areas in the country, and I know Boston, San Francisco, D.C., as well as many other cities, but those are the ones that are top of mind, regularly have various kinds of meetup groups, and you're able to then tap into a large knowledge base of accessibility professionals and folks who have different areas of interest or who came about this in different ways. So not everybody is in accessibility. Not everyone is in accessibility with the same background or the same mission, and so you might be able to find folks who more closely match what you're looking for and can get you that information.
We're going to keep taking a couple more questions, but just to let everyone know that we do record this call. It will be on our YouTube site later, so that if you want to go back through the information and hear it again, this entire thing will be on YouTube, or if you have a colleague or a friend who you think would benefit from this, you can just refer them to our YouTube site. And our next webinar coming up will be on youth employment for people with disabilities. We have many different webinars that you can access that are on our YouTube channel, so please don't hesitate to go look for them. All of them are free. We're a nonprofit organization, so this is a public service, and I want to thank Sharon and Dana for the terrific job that they're doing. We're just going to take a couple more questions. Denise is asking, do you need to turn on something to use the keyboard to navigate a site, or is it something the site design needs to build in?
That's actually a very good question, Denise. It's kind of an answer of both. You can adjust your web settings in your browser. Thinking with using Apple, like if you're using Safari, there's a way to turn on visual focus, for instance. But it also has to be programmatically in the coding there, so it's a little bit of both. Usually, if people don't want to see visual focus, they can turn that off. But a lot of it is within the code. There is a lot of tab index that you can add so that things are in the tab order that you want, and that makes them programmatically available to the keyboard. But usually it's kind of more built in. It's pretty difficult these days to make things that aren't available to the keyboard. It's only when things get more fancy and more complex that you skip out on keyboard usage.
I just want to note that a number of these links that were mentioned have been put into the text that's here on the website so that you can find a lot of these links. And I want to thank you guys for putting these links on here. I'm scrolling through all these different links to see, about the YouTube site. Our YouTube site is, I believe, RespectabilityUSA, and you can go to our website also, RespectabilityUSA. But let me just actually go back to so that you can see my contact information and our website information, Jennifer M. at respectabilityusa.org. Again, we're a resource for you, and we want to be helpful to you. This is really going to wrap up our call. I want to thank all of you who came and listened with us. I know that some of you are very experienced at this, and for some of you, this is the very first time. We really are delighted to be able to celebrate worldwide Global Accessibility Access Day and to have such terrific speakers on this day. So Dana and Sharon, I want to thank you tremendously for being with us today. I want to remind you of their contact information for Dana Marlowe and Sharon Rosenblatt. If you have more detailed questions, they're happy to answer them for you. But really, it's a delight to be in this business of enabling people to access everything around the world via the internet and other means. So thank you, Dana, thank you, Sharon, and thank you all who have listened. And to those of you who are listening, if you have any questions or comments about what you'd like to hear from us in terms of future webinars, please do give us ideas, and you will be getting a comment form that is asking you to rate the webinar today. We are always looking for how we can do a better job, so please don't hesitate to give us ideas. We really do appreciate it. So thank you again. Thank you to all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's Respectability webinar. Thank you all for attending.
The moderator has ended the conference. Goodbye. Thank you for calling.